What if I told you that your greatest failure, the lowest point of your life, isn't a sign that you failed, but instead God's clearest invitation for a new beginning? It sounds crazy, I know. In a world where we're taught to only celebrate victories, success, and unshakable strength, this idea sounds almost like heresy. But what if your deepest weakness, the one you try to hide from everyone, and maybe even from yourself, is actually your greatest strength? And what if the shame you feel for not being able to solve everything on your own is the first step toward a freedom you never imagined was possible? Believe me, it's not the mountaintop that defines a miracle, it's the depth of the valley. You've tried everything. You've read the self-help books, listened to motivational podcasts, and followed the advice of successful friends. But honestly, with every new attempt to fix the situation, the hole seems to get deeper. The frustration is real, and the weight on your shoulders is almost unbearable. You feel alone, overwhelmed, and in the silence of your soul, maybe for the first time, you wonder if life is simply over and if your story has already been written. That feeling of failure, of having weak faith, is overwhelming. I completely understand what you're going through. Many people, myself included, have been in that exact same place. Society has taught us to value perfection and hide our flaws, making us believe that we are only worthy of something good when we are in control. Your belief that you need to be whole to deserve God's attention isn't yours. It was imposed on you. This is the cruelest lie, the most dangerous trap that life sets in our path. The idea that God only shows up for the strong, and that your pain disqualifies you. But the truth is that your desperation, that raw honesty of someone at their limit, is the clearest proof of your faith. In this video, I'm going to show you why your moment of greatest weakness isn't your end, but rather your starting point. We're going to deconstruct this idea that you have to be perfect to be loved by God. I'm going to reveal what the Bible teaches about hitting rock bottom and how, instead of being ashamed of it, you can use it as the exact place where God's hand enters your life and changes your story forever. Prepare for a paradigm shift, because from today on, you'll never look at your desperation the same way again. Since birth, society has sold us a very dangerous lie, self-sufficiency. We are taught to fend for ourselves, to be strong, and to depend on no one. The world applauds the self-made man, the woman who overcame everything on her own. And we, seduced by this narrative, absorb the belief that to be worthy of success or respect, we must solve our problems with our own hands, without anyone's help. This is the first and greatest barrier to God's intervention in our lives, because it prevents us from admitting our weakness and surrendering to the power of something greater. Have you ever found yourself in this struggle, trying to juggle plates, managing your finances, your relationships, your health, all at the same time? With every small defeat, every failure, the weight of guilt only increases. You feel that because you couldn't solve things on your own. You're a failure, unworthy of any help. Your mind fills with thoughts like, I should be stronger, and I should have done things differently. This internal voice of accusation is the echo of the lie of self-sufficiency, which paralyzes us and keeps us away from the only source of help that truly matters. But the truth is liberating. God's intervention isn't a prize for the strong, but a gift for the weak. God doesn't expect you to have everything figured out or to come to him with a list of victories to prove you're worthy of his attention. On the contrary, he longs to enter into your mess, your chaos, your rock bottom. He isn't looking for perfect heroes, but for honest hearts that admit they can't do it alone anymore. Your weakness isn't an obstacle to God, but rather a channel for his power to manifest in your life. This is one of the greatest revelations in the Bible, and the Apostle Paul experienced it intensely. He was a powerful man with a gigantic mission, but he carried a thorn in the flesh, 3 times he prayed for God to remove it, and the answer he received wasn't immediate relief, but a truth that changed his perspective. The voice of God told him, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." This isn't a phrase of consolation, it's a declaration of power. Paul wasn't boasting in weakness itself, as if it were something to be celebrated. He was boasting in the space that his weakness created for the power of Christ to act. He understood that when he stopped trying to be strong on his own, the strength of God could finally take that place. He gloried because his weakness was the exact point of contact between his limited humanity and the unlimited divinity of God. He understood that his inadequacy was the blank canvas where divine grace and power could paint the greatest work of his life. And this is the major paradigm shift for you today. Stop fighting alone. Take off the superhero cape you've been carrying that is crushing you. Stop trying to fix everything and hide your weaknesses from God, as if He didn't already know them. Allow yourself to be weak. Allow yourself to admit that you no longer have the strength to continue. This act of surrender is the first step toward your freedom. Your prayer from now on doesn't need to be a request for help, but a surrender, a complete giving up of your control to Him. Instead of saying, "God, help me solve this," say, "God, I can't do this anymore. I place this situation in your hands because I have failed in all my attempts. I surrender my control, my shame, my fear, and I trust that your power will manifest in my weakness." This sincere and humble prayer is the most powerful one you can make. Accepting your weakness isn't a sign of defeat, it's God's strategy for victory. When you give up on trying to be God in your own life, you finally give Him permission to be God for you. It's at this moment that divine intervention not only becomes possible, but inevitable. And this is the bridge to our next revelation, that your desperation has a much deeper purpose than you imagine. This is where our world-conditioned mind plays another trick on us. We've been taught that desperation is the opposite of faith, that if you're desperate, you have little faith. Because of this, we feel immense guilt. We try to mask our pain, pretend everything is okay, and force a faith we don't feel. Our body is at rock bottom, but our mouth says, "It's okay, I trust," creating an internal hypocrisy that only distances us from God, because He doesn't want a performance. He wants your truth. Do you feel guilty about this? For feeling that deep down your soul is screaming in pain, but you need to show a face of tranquility to the world and even to God? This attempt to have perfect faith only generates more anxiety and loneliness. You try to force yourself to have faith, but with every attempt, the anxiety and feeling of failure only increase. But what if I told you that your desperation isn't a sign of weakness, but can be your greatest strength? And what if I told you it's not the opposite of faith, but rather the language that God finally hears in a way that perfect faith never could? Pure, honest desperation is the rawest and most sincere form of prayer there is. It cuts through all the frills, all the formalities, all the pretty words we've learned to say at church. It's a cry from the soul that God doesn't ignore. Think for a moment. When you're at rock bottom, there's no more room for half-truths or trying to impress. It's just you, your pain, and a genuine desire for something to change. This brutal honesty is what moves the heart of God. He hears the cry of those in the mud pit, not of those on the mountaintop. The psalmist, in Psalm 40, wrote something that powerfully summarizes this truth. "I waited patiently for the Lord. He turned to me and heard my cry. He lifted me out of the pit of destruction, out of the mud pit. He set my feet on a rock and gave me a firm place to stand." Notice the location of the cry. It wasn't in a place of comfort or victory, but from a pit of destruction, from a mud pit. God didn't wait for the psalmist to clean himself up, get up, or have more faith to hear Him. He leaned down to Him in that exact place of pain and desperation. What the psalmist offered to God wasn't a perfect prayer, but a cry, a shout for help. And that's exactly what God heard. This is the truth that sets you free. God doesn't turn away from your desperation. He leans into it. He doesn't want your facade of perfection. He wants your sincerity. From now on, stop being ashamed of your tears and your pain. Present them to God as your prayer. Let go of the pretty words and empty religiosity. Don't pretend you're okay when you're not. Your pain isn't a sign of spiritual failure. It is your most sincere invitation for God's intervention. Prayer now is an honest conversation where you can say, God, I can't take it anymore. I'm at rock bottom, and only you can get me out of here. This is the prayer that God hears. Allow your tears to wash away the lie that you need to be strong and perfect all the time. Allow your pain to be your most sincere prayer. Desperation, when surrendered to God, stops being a burden and becomes a direct channel of communication with heaven. It's the moment when your soul, exhausted from fighting, finally finds rest and a genuine hope that something will change. And it's from this point of total surrender that God begins to act. He will lift you out of that mud pit. He will set your feet on the rock, and He will give you a firm place to stand. And when He does, your life won't just go back to normal. In fact, it will be redefined for a new purpose. And it's about this new identity, about what happens after divine intervention, that we are going to talk about now. Because your story of pain won't be a final point, but the beginning of something much greater. After going through the fire, the struggle, the rock bottom, and finally experiencing God's hand rescuing you, there's a temptation. The temptation to think that your life has gone back to normal, and that you need to forget what happened. But the great truth is that your life hasn't returned to normal. It has been redefined for a new purpose. You are no longer the same person you were before. The experience has marked you, transformed you, and this new identity is your greatest weapon for the future. The problem, however, is that many of us feel pressured to be a perfect example after a divine intervention. We feel obligated to hide our scars, to pretend the struggle never existed. We believe the lie that our scars are marks of shame. This prevents us from using our story to help other people and keeps us trapped in our past, instead of transforming it into our greatest testimony. The revelation is this: your rock-bottom story isn't a stain. It's a testimony, a beacon of hope. For others who are in the exact place you were, God didn't just rescue you to give you a new life, but to transform you into a channel of light for those who are still in darkness. Your scars are not a source of shame. They are unquestionable proof of God's faithfulness in your life. The story of Joseph is the greatest example of this. He was sold into slavery, unjustly imprisoned, abandoned, and forgotten. But God was with him every step of the way. God didn't just get him out of prison. He used the time in prison to mold him into a leader. And at the right moment, Joseph became the governor of Egypt, and the wisdom he acquired during his journey saved not only Egypt, but his entire family. He summarized it all with the phrase, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Joseph understood that his story of suffering wasn't a mistake, but a preparation. He wasn't ashamed of the years he spent in prison. He used that experience to lead with compassion and wisdom. He looked at the past and saw God's hand in everything, turning evil into a greater purpose. And that's exactly the paradigm shift you need to have today. Look back at your story not with shame, but with gratitude. Understand that your experience wasn't a mistake, but a divine preparation. Every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of desperation was a piece of clay that God used to mold you into the person you are today. Your pain made you more sensitive, your struggle made you stronger, and your rescue experience made you a source of hope. You are now a survivor, not a victim. Your story isn't just yours. It belongs to God, and He has transformed it into a powerful tool to touch lives. Your voice, when talking about the desperation you felt and how God rescued you from it, has the power to ignite hope in the heart of someone who thought all was lost. You don't need to have perfect answers, you just need to have an honest story. Your new identity is that of someone who was rescued and now has a message of redemption to share. Don't be silent. Don't hide. Use your story of rescue to glorify God and to show the world that there is no rock bottom so deep that His hand cannot reach. You came here feeling that your desperation was proof of failure, but now you understand that your weakness isn't your end. It's the doorway to God's power. You've discovered that your desperation isn't the opposite of faith, but rather the most honest prayer you can make. And above all, you've understood that your story of struggle and rescue isn't a stain to be hidden, but your greatest tool of hope. You are no longer someone who was abandoned at rock bottom, but a survivor, someone who was rescued by God and now has a story of redemption to share with the world. If you connected with the idea that your story of struggle is now your greatest tool, then this video right here will show you how to transform that pain into purpose and be a light for other people.